starting with this session about smart project management, and I just want to say 2 words about how important it is to have the possibility. We are getting the feeling that there is a need to have the management of project directly by the museum people, which is something that for us, I'm a businesswoman, I'm from the entrepreneur world, so for us is in some way is even something that makes us afraid because we never know if given that if this freedom that the museum people want is good or not for us, but I think it's good because it is important that I think it's a way to grow up together and do the best for the visitors. So we will listen to, in this afternoon, about 4 projects regarding the project management in the content for mobile tour and for mobile experience. We will start with Allegra, Burnette, and Chiara Bernasconi from the Museum of Modern Art of New York, and then later I will introduce the other speaker.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, cool. So thank you first of all, thank you for the organizing this. It's a pleasure for me, especially to be back in Italy and telling you a little bit about what we're doing in New York at MoMA. We are now, we're talking about this topic here because as more and more emphasis is placed on digital projects at our institutions, there is an increasing need for transparency and a clear view into those projects. So this applies not only to the stakeholders, senior staffs, but also to the project team. These projects require investment in terms of money and time, and it's really important to have a methodology that really allows to manage the project. Until fairly recently, the traditional waterfall approach was considered the main way, the only way to develop software and manage a digital project. I'm sure you're all familiar with this projects that also fit this diagram, where all the activities are divided into individual phases that follow each other in sequence. So you have stakeholder participation that is limited to the very beginning and the very end. The very beginning when you define the requirements and rarely review them afterwards, which we'll see is a problem. And then design is reviewed, it's signed off, and then again at the very end of the process after coding, which could take a long time, when the final product is ready to be deployed, the stakeholders see again their product. And it's at that point that problems arise when requirements are missed, sometimes changed along the way, and at that point it's very costly to make changes, and sometimes there are delays in schedule. This is the last redesign of MoMA.org that we did, which we launched in 2009, and this followed the waterfall method. We spent a lot of time in the beginning of the project trying to really define the scope and make sure that we were having, a design that was signed off, and that also took a while, and then final implementation. The duration of the project was 18 months, over 18 months, and a lot can change, as we know, in 18 months, especially in technology. In this case, we actually had museum-wide rebranding that came when the site was 80% complete. I don't know if you can see very well this, but at the beginning of the redesign project, we created this Gantt chart using OmniPlan to show all the dependencies and tasks. The problem with showing this type of schedule up front is really the lack of predictability and accuracy. So what's supposed to be a tool to forecast became really a reporting tool limited to past casting, if we want to call it that way, and really a chore for the project manager to just keep up to date for the stakeholders to make sure that they knew what we were up to. Some of the problems with the waterfall model that we saw with the redesign, but also with other projects, have been the limited participation of stakeholders throughout the life of the project. the tendency to do past casting, as we said before, rather than forecasting. So the idea is that a Gantt chart doesn't have to be this like dead document that you just show stakeholders after the fact. It's supposed to be an ongoing coordination tool. The inability to rethink or adjust technical requirements based on knowledge gained during the process and the project, and then the tendency to require too many features instead of focusing on the minimum viable product. This is something that we are working to make sure that everyone understands this concept. And then together with this, the lack of prioritization of features, the stakeholder usually expect everything outlined in the scope to be included in the launch. That's not always the case. And then the inability to address a change of scope as they arise without disrupting the launch schedule or changing the budget.
Okay. So despite the shortcomings of the waterfall approach that Chiara talked about with the large digital projects like the redesign, we still use it in certain cases for particular projects. Those tend to be ones with clearly defined scope, a set list of stakeholders, limited requirements, and a short timeline. So one example of this is a recent exhibition site we did for the Magritte show, which recently closed. This was a site that was designed and built within about 3 months for a fixed price using an outside design firm. And as the site does not require any changes after launch, there was no need for ongoing reprioritization of features or iterative releases. So after the experience of our redesign in 2009, we had been trying to sort of adopt an agile model for software development ourselves. But we really had made only modest headway into this process until we decided to really embrace it wholeheartedly with our new MoMA Audio Plus project. So the impetus for this project was that we had a 3-year contract for audio device distribution and audio production that was about to end. So this was an opportunity for us to rethink how we presented audio within the museum. We had, prior to this, the push-button wands for calling up audio tours based on a number pad that we were distributing for free in the museum, and we wanted to move towards something that was more interactive and also connected with our other mobile programs and our website. So at the start of this project in the spring of 2012, one of the most important things that we did was bring together a cross-departmental group that came together to look really holistically at how we offered interpretation around the museum. This ranged from looking at our family activity guides, gallery labels, gallery talks, as well as the audio tour. And having this group involved from the beginning was key to ensuring stakeholder participation and feedback. So what you see here are sort of the subgroups that made up this group that we called RISE, which was Reimagining Interpretive Support and Engagement. So that there were people who focused on content, people who focused on devices and distribution, and so on. So it really helped to... Oh, closer, sorry. Okay, is that better? So once we had made the decision, one of the earlier things that we did was a lot of research with this group, and out of that came a decision to create an iOS app that we decided to call MoMA Audio Plus, which was sort of the new incarnation of our audio program. So once we had made these decisions, the next step in the process was working on the app itself, which we began with a brainstorming with digital media and education. We literally sat in this room and sketched on whiteboards, and then used an app called TurboScan to document the ideas and processes. So what you see on the left here is us in action, and on the right is one of the turbo scans of these diagrams. So this is a very quick, rapid process of just getting ideas out and documenting them. And everything that we created was then uploaded to Basecamp. We knew early on that we needed to bring in outside help for the development of the app itself, but we also wanted our own programmers to stay intimately involved with the project so that they could add to it, maintain it, and grow it over time. So we ended up working with a company called Pivotal Labs, who are known for agile development with software, but they're also known for helping to support and ramp up existing teams. They're based in New York, but also with offices in other parts of the US and around the world. And they really were our tutors and trainers for learning about the Agile process. And they really helped guide us in implementing this new approach more comprehensively. So the first step with working Pivotal was an all-day inception meeting, and it sounds more painful than it is. And this took place at their offices with, again, with digital media and education teams from both departments, going over the goals of the project, defining the scope, and writing stories on index cards for all of the features we wanted to include, and then estimating them and prioritizing them. It was an intense day. I actually put the schedule on the left there, so you can see it really breaks down, and we actually followed the schedule, including the 3 to 3:30 break for ping pong, which is a very important part of it. So during this process, the features of the app were broken down into individual stories, which were based on what users of the app would do. These features are then rated by a system of points, and you can actually see the points at the top. It goes from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, and that's the scale of effort involved with those stories. And then workload and time are estimated based on the amount of how the points sort of add up. And then the priorities of the stories are determine what gets rolled out first. So this was a shift in scheduling approach that was a little bit hard to explain to staff around the museum, and perhaps was the hardest concept for them to grasp about this whole process. But I think when paired with a description of the iterative nature of what this project was about, everyone seemed to get the general idea and buy into this notion of prioritizing the most important things first. So given that we had a hard launch date by which we had to have new devices on the floor, we were continually evaluating and readjusting those priorities so that we could meet that deadline. And this ensured that we had a completed project ready to go, even though we knew we had a lot more features to add after the fact. So all of the stories that came out of the inception meeting were entered into this program called Pivotal Tracker, which is an agile project management tool that's developed and used by Pivotal Labs and available to anyone to use. The stories are ordered in columns, showing what the developers have completed, what they're currently working on, and what's ready for them in the sort of hopper to work on in the backlog. And that means that it's waiting to be prioritized and in the icebox, and that means it's waiting to be prioritized and add to the backlog. And so the developers basically go through and pick the next story, work through it, and go through that sequence. And the stories are labeled and tagged to make it easier to find and group them. So the next step of the process was to create annotated wireframes, which we then uploaded into a program called Notism, which is a web-based design collaboration platform so everyone on the team could access all of these diagrams, comment on them, and ask questions. So you could have some of the process happening collaboratively online through the site. And then those wireframes were then turned into more fleshed out designs, and you can see all the little number spots there are actually comments or annotations on the design. So it might be calling out the color spec or the type size, or somebody might be saying, I need assets for this type of thing. And then what this did is it gave us not only an ongoing archive of the designs, but also the decisions that were made along the way. So we could go back and see the discussion as it took place. And the final designs were attached to the relevant stories in Pivotal Tracker, so that when the developers turned to that story, they had all the information and assets that they needed and were ready to code.
Okay. So getting everyone to use the tools continuously became I guess, easier with this project because we got all the developers to do a stand-up meeting every day where they're talking about what they've been doing the day before and the day off. And then the IPM, which is an iteration planning meeting, again in Agile vocabulary. And that's a really helpful moment because you really know what the priorities are for the week. And another really helpful tool has been the retrospective meeting, which is an opportunity to review the process and progress periodically with the group. So acknowledging that there's no perfect process, and we have a unique team, unique individuals, so it's really important to meet, continually update the process to match the changing situations. So what all this meant, first of all, our programmers paired with pivotal programmers, meaning they were literally sitting next to, side by side, coding, writing the same code, and this keeps the programming move faster, but also helps programmers to figure out when they have roadblocks, and also helped us ramp up our skills in Ruby, which is the language we use to build the site. We did test-driven development, meant that tests were written before it was programmed. When the tests were passed, then the code was released. Essentially, this results in a more solid program with fewer bugs, which helps a lot when you don't have a team on the team, some people that only do QA and testing. We were able to release a functional app at various times throughout the project to the stakeholders so that they could use it as it was in progress. And the release here, the release schedule is shown here, but even that is iterative, so there were a lot more releases that happened between the markers. So here we have a list of meetings. We all try to avoid unnecessary meetings. So I guess this for us was a way to really make sure that we had smaller but more meaningful, more frequent, more efficient meetings with the people that really needed to be part of the meetings. So we had the RISE meetings we talked about at the beginning, meetings with subgroups that were sort of talking about the content devices as needed, Inception that Allegra talked about, the IPM meetings, the retrospectives to discuss how to improve the communication, and then finally, but very important, senior staff presentation and presentation to all the departments and people that in the museum needed to know what was happening with the app and needed to give their feedback. So we're very lucky because we have a team of 4 developers. We're actually looking for a front-end developer if you know someone. But the current challenge is really to make sure that the developers have time to both work on these very large projects, but also to be able to do maintenance on MoMA.org and to do upgrades. So the Agile methodology seems to work very well when you focus on one project, which is something that we all wish we could do, but in reality, when it's often the case is that you have to manage multiple projects. So one thing that Pivotal Labs has been developing is in this beta version of the Pivotal Tracker is to create a multi-project workspace where you can see here that you can prioritize stories from different projects and sort of have a dashboard and move things around. So that's one thing that I encourage you to look at if you are managing multiple projects at the same time. Finally, going agile in your institution. I mean, for those that don't have an internal team of developers but are working with vendors, you know, as Ilaria was saying, like we work with vendors a lot, and there's nothing that says that we can't actually use the Agile methodology with them, and we can talk to them about it. And nobody's paying me for saying this, but I really believe that Agile is the way to go. Because for many reasons, because first of all, the stories are defined from the user perspective at the very beginning in a very specific way, so that you really make sure that there is an accuracy, a flexibility and transparency with the vendor that doesn't happen when you have this like vague scope, and then, you know, later on you figure out you forgot something, and then, you know, there are problems. So in general, I think that the Agile approach really helps when the needs keep changing, and we know in the culture world that that's the case all the time. The budgets are small, and you know, instead of having like a huge plan and trying to sort of put out a product that is already old by the time is ready. It's a good idea to create a pilot and keep iterating and give short releases, small releases. So I guess that's the idea of Agile, and really we think it makes sense to invest in this approach because it lets you shift and reprioritize as needed to make maximum use of your resources. But it really does require a lot of involvement and active, constant involvement along the way. What's next for us? We're hoping to apply what we have learned using the Agile methodology for MoMA Audio Plus to future projects, especially when we embark in larger projects, such as the next round of MoMA.org redesign. So we're going back to the beginning, our experience with the redesign 2009, and the key aspect that we're ensuring is we're trying really hard to make sure we're putting in place before this redesign is ensuring stakeholders' involvement along the way and buy-in from them along the way with a series of meetings and tools that we have discussed, but also figure out how to handle iterative releases. Then it's easier to think about iterative releases for the app case, but I'm sure we will figure out how to do it for sections of the site, and maybe that's going to be next Museum and the Web discussion, how we were able to do that.
Thank you. I have a very quick question because I'm really interested in knowing how the cooperation work between the external and external resources, because I read in the mobile strategy survey by Loïc Taillon of 2013 about this trend of museum, particularly the big one like yours, to work with internal resources a lot, and this is changing in a very strong way the market, because we mobile provider, audio guide provider used to work proposing a global service, and now we are partner, we are consultants. So I really would love to know how the cooperation was between internal and external resources, because it's important for all of us to know how to put ourselves in this new market.
Well, I think one of the early decisions that we made was to say, okay, we want to be actively involved with developing this program because we have to live with it, we have to grow it, we have to be able to fix it as it breaks along the way. So it was very important to us, and because we have developers in-house, it was very important for us to be actively involved with the programming. At the same time, these are the developers who are working on every aspect of MoMA.org and all these other projects. So we also knew, and there was one person who knew a little bit about iOS development and had done some work there, but we knew that we needed more expertise. And so that for us was also one of the reasons why Agile appealed to us, because it was an opportunity to take our internal and external resources and really be partners together. So I think the model of working with vendors is not, here's the list of things I want, come back and give it to me when you're done. It's really about, let's figure this process out along the way. And I think that the more successful vendors, thinking through this new business model will be the ones who kind of figure out how to work closely in that way with the partners who can do that. Now, that's not to say that everybody has developers in-house, and I think that where there aren't developers, you sort of model a different kind of collaboration. But again, I think it's much more about these smaller chunks of discussion and relationship rather than sort of passing off a set of requirements and passing things back without that sort of dialogue in between.
Okay. Thank you.
For us, we do work with Antenna on the distribution and the device maintenance. So also figuring out that there is a way to break down a project so that you don't have to handle everything. Yeah. But maybe we decided to focus on the programming because it was important for us to make sure that we were able to keep it up to date and maintaining for years afterwards. But then other things that were, maybe we were not ready to take on, like distribution, for example, we were very happy to have vendors involved.
Yes.
So,
and you separated the two moments. The program, because normally the mobile vendors used to do the project part of the job and then the management of the service. You separated it in with two different partners. You have a partner who helped you in developing the app, and then a partner who would help you in the management of the service.
Right, management of the service, but also in audio content production.
Okay.
So content production that then gets handed to us to integrate into the app, that gets handed back to the same company for distribution. So yeah, it's about, you know, how do you break down a big project, as Chiara said, and where is the expertise that you want to bring in at those particular points of time. So it does involve more coordination, but you see this model happening more where rather than an entire suite of services, you're breaking it down a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.